Millionaire marries a fat woman to upset his ex-wife, everyone laughed. Months later, she surprised everyone. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Connor Drake stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his expensive tie. Today was supposed to be his revenge, but why didn't he feel happier? At 45 years old, he had everything money could buy, except the woman he thought he'd spend his life with. Isabella had left him 6 months ago for a younger man, and the divorce had been nasty, really nasty. "You're getting old, Connor," she had told him in front of everyone at their favorite restaurant. "And boring. David actually knows how to have fun." The words still stung even now. That's when Connor came up with his plan. He would marry someone Isabella would hate, someone who would make her realize what she had thrown away. And he knew exactly who that someone would be. Lucy Monroe worked as a nutritionist at one of his wellness centers. She was in her late 30s, smart as a whip, and plus-sized. Isabella, with her obsession with appearances, would be horrified. Perfect. "Miss Monroe," he had said, calling her into his office one day. "I have an unusual proposition for you." Lucy had looked at him suspiciously, smoothing down her sensible blue dress. "What kind of proposition, Mr. Drake?" "I need a wife," he said bluntly. "A temporary one, for show. 1 year, that's all I'm asking. In return, I'll pay off your family's debts and set up a trust fund for your nephew's medical care." Lucy hadn't answered right away. She'd sat there, studying him with those intelligent brown eyes of hers. "You want to marry me to get back at your ex-wife," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Connor admitted. "No point in lying. Because you're everything she's not." "You mean because I'm fat?" "I mean because you're real," Connor said, though they both knew he was lying. "Do we have a deal?" Lucy thought about her sister struggling with her son's medical bills, about all the times people like Isabella had looked down their noses at her. "Yes," she said finally, "we have a deal." The wedding was small but elegant. Connor made sure Isabella would be there. He'd invited her new boyfriend to a business meeting that day in the same hotel. As expected, she crashed the ceremony, her face turning red with anger and shock. "This is what you're replacing me with," Isabella laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, Connor, I knew you were desperate. But this?" Lucy held her head high. She'd dealt with bullies like Isabella her whole life. "At least he's replacing you with someone who has both beauty and brains," she shot back. "All you have is last season's Botox." Connor's mother nearly fainted. His sister stormed out. But for the first time since Isabella left him, Connor felt something other than pain. He looked at Lucy, standing there in her white dress, refusing to be ashamed, and wondered if maybe he'd stumbled onto something more than just revenge. The reception was a disaster, just as Connor had planned. His society friends whispered behind their hands. Isabella drank too much champagne and made loud, nasty comments. Through it all, Lucy remained calm and composed, even managing to make a few allies among the guests with her quick wit and warm smile. Later that night, in the honeymoon suite Connor had booked for appearance's sake, Lucy kicked off her uncomfortable shoes and looked at her new husband. "Well, that was quite a show we put on." "You were magnificent," Connor admitted. "The way you handled Isabella." "I've had plenty of practice dealing with mean girls," Lucy shrugged. "Now which bedroom is mine?" Connor showed her to her suite. They'd agreed to separate rooms, of course. This was just business after all. But as he lay in his own bed that night, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Lucy had looked at him during their first dance, like she could see right through all his defenses to the hurt man underneath. "This is just temporary," he reminded himself, "just for show. But sometimes, life has other plans." The next morning, their faces were all over the society pages. "Drake marries plus-size employee," screamed one headline. "Connor Drake's shocking wedding choice," declared another. Isabella must have been furious, which should have made Connor happy. Instead, he found himself worried about how Lucy would handle the negative press. But when he saw her at breakfast, she was calmly reading the articles and chuckling. "They forgot to mention my PhD in nutrition," she said, buttering her toast. "And my successful practice. Funny how they only focus on my size." Connor felt something he hadn't expected. Shame. She was right. Even he had chosen her just because of how she looked. Maybe he wasn't so different from Isabella after all. As they settled into their new life together, Connor began to notice things about his temporary wife. How she always remembered the staff members' names. How she could make anyone feel comfortable with her easy laugh and genuine interest in their lives. How she never let anyone's cruel comments break her stride. What he didn't notice, not yet, was how his own heart was slowly beginning to change. 1 month into their marriage of convenience, Lucy sat in her private gym at Connor's mansion, staring at her reflection in the wall-length mirror. She wasn't doing this for them, not for Isabella's cruel comments or Connor's society friends' whispers. She was doing this for herself. "Mrs. Drake?" Maria, one of the housekeepers, poked her head in. "Your mother-in-law is here." Lucy took a deep breath. Evelyn Drake had made it her mission to make Lucy's life difficult from day one. "Thank you, Maria. Tell her I'll be right there." In the living room, Evelyn sat perched on the edge of the sofa, like she was afraid to touch anything. "Lucy, dear," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I've invited some friends over for dinner tonight. I do hope you'll make yourself presentable." Lucy knew exactly what Evelyn meant. "Don't worry," she said calmly. "I'll wear something appropriate. And maybe skip dessert," Evelyn suggested with a cold smile. "Dr. Richards will be there. He's a wonderful weight loss surgeon. I took the liberty of making you an appointment." Before Lucy could respond, Connor walked in. He'd been doing that a lot lately, showing up just when his mother was at her worst. "Mother," he said firmly, "if you can't treat my wife with respect, you can leave." Evelyn's face turned red. "I'm trying to help. You can't tell me you're happy with this situation." "This situation," Connor said, "is my marriage, and Lucy is my wife." After Evelyn stormed out, Lucy looked at Connor curiously. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Connor ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I'm sorry about her. About all of them." "I'm used to it," Lucy shrugged. "But Connor, why do you keep defending me? This isn't part of our deal." Connor couldn't meet her eyes. The truth was, he didn't know why. Or maybe he did, but wasn't ready to admit it. That night's dinner was exactly as awful as Lucy expected. Evelyn had invited 3 plastic surgeons, 2 fitness gurus, and Isabella. They all talked about diet and exercise, like Lucy wasn't even there, making pointed comments about letting yourself go and basic self-respect. Lucy listened quietly until she couldn't take it anymore. You know," she said, interrupting a conversation about the dangers of being overweight, "as a licensed nutritionist with a PhD in dietary science, I can tell you that your information is outdated and incorrect." The table went silent. Connor looked up from his plate, surprised. "The relationship between health and body size is far more complex than you're suggesting," Lucy continued. "For example, did you know that yo-yo dieting and crash diets actually cause more health problems than maintaining a steady weight, even if that weight is higher than what society considers ideal?" Dr. Richards sputtered. "Well, I hardly think." "No," Lucy said firmly. "You don't think. You judge. There's a difference." She stood up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an early morning tomorrow. I'm launching a new health and wellness program at Connor's company." After she left, Connor found himself staring at the empty doorway, seeing his wife in a completely new light. The next morning, Lucy started her own journey. She set up a home gym, created a balanced meal plan, and began documenting everything on social media. Not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to show others like her that health came in all sizes. To her surprise, Connor started joining her in the gym. "I need to get in shape too," he said when she questioned him. Getting older isn't easy. They fell into a routine. Morning workouts, healthy breakfasts, and long talks about their days. Lucy found herself looking forward to these moments, even though she kept reminding herself this marriage wasn't real. Meanwhile, Isabella wasn't taking their marriage well. She started showing up at Connor's office, making scenes. "She's changing you," she accused one day, barging into his office. "The Connor I knew would never eat quinoa." Connor looked up from his paperwork. "Maybe that's a good thing." "The Connor you knew wasn't very happy." Isabella's face turned ugly. "She's fat, Connor. Fat. Do you know what people are saying about you?" "Yes," Connor said calmly. "They're saying I married an intelligent, kind woman who makes me laugh, who cares about more than just appearances, who's making me a better person." "It's supposed to be temporary," Isabella shouted. "That was the plan." Connor froze. "What plan?" But Isabella had already said too much. She turned and fled, leaving Connor with a sinking feeling in his stomach. What exactly had she meant by that? As weeks passed, Lucy's social media following grew. Women from all over started following her journey, inspired by her honest posts about strength, health, and self-acceptance. She wasn't just losing weight, she was gaining confidence, and it showed. Connor found himself watching her more and more. The way she lit up when talking about her work, how she treated everyone with kindness, from his richest business partners to the gardener's children, the sound of her laugh during their morning workouts. One evening, he overheard her on the phone with her sister. "No, Jenny, it's not like that," she was saying. "Connor and we have an arrangement, that's all." I can't let myself forget that. The pain in her voice made him want to burst into the room and tell her, what? That he was starting to wish their marriage wasn't just for show, that somehow, without meaning to, he'd begun to care about her in a way that had nothing to do with revenge. Instead, he walked away, more confused than ever. But one thing was becoming clear. This temporary arrangement was getting more complicated by the day. Connor couldn't stop thinking about Isabella's words. What plan was she talking about? He started paying more attention to the business meetings he'd been neglecting since his marriage to Lucy. What he discovered made his blood run cold. "Sir," his secretary Janet whispered one morning, "I think you should see this." She handed him a stack of papers. Documents had been signed while he was distracted with the wedding and its aftermath. His company shares were being quietly transferred to a new holding company, one controlled by Isabella's new boyfriend, David. "Get me everything you can find," Connor ordered. "And Janet, don't tell anyone about this." Meanwhile, Lucy's fitness journey was gaining serious attention. Her social media followers had grown to over 100,000. Women loved her honest approach to health and her message about loving yourself at any size. But not everyone was happy about her success. "She's making a fool of you," Connor's sister Barbara told him over lunch. "Running around in workout clothes, posting videos. It's not how a Drake wife should behave." Connor watched Lucy filming a workout video in their home gym. She was glowing with happiness, encouraging her followers with genuine warmth. "Actually," he said, "I think it's exactly how a Drake wife should behave. She's helping people." That evening, Lucy had exciting news. "The Today Show wants to interview me," she announced at dinner. "They're doing a segment on body positivity and health at every size." Connor felt an unexpected surge of pride. Then he remembered their arrangement was temporary, and his heart sank. In 6 months, Lucy would leave with her promised payment, and he'd lose. What exactly? When had she become so important to him? But Connor had bigger problems. His investigation into the company transfers led him to a shocking discovery. Isabella and David had been planning this for months, even before she left him. The marriage had been just a distraction, keeping him busy while they took control of his company. "You look worried," Lucy said that night, finding him in his study with a glass of whiskey. "Want to talk about it?" Connor looked at her, really looked at her. Gone was the uncomfortable woman from their wedding day. Lucy had blossomed, confident and radiant, and here she was, genuinely concerned about him, even though their marriage was just business. "I've been a fool," he admitted. "Isabella, she's been stealing my company." Lucy sat down across from him. "Tell me everything." So he did, about the transferred shares, the secret meetings, the way Isabella had played him perfectly. "She knew I'd do something stupid after she left me," he finished bitterly. "Getting married to spite her. I walked right into their trap." Lucy was quiet for a long moment. "Well then," she said finally, "we'll just have to show them they messed with the wrong couple." "We?" Connor asked. "Lucy, this isn't your fight. Our arrangement—" "Forget the arrangement," Lucy cut him off. "You helped me when your mother tried to humiliate me. Now it's my turn to help you." The next few weeks were intense. Lucy introduced Connor to her social media team, young experts in digital marketing and public relations. Together, they crafted a campaign showcasing Connor's company's commitment to health and wellness, with Lucy as the face of their new inclusive approach. The public loved it. Stock prices rose. Investors who had been wary of David's aggressive takeover attempts were reassured by the positive press, and through it all, Lucy stood by Connor's side, supporting him just as he had supported her. One evening, after a particularly successful board meeting, Connor found Lucy in the garden. She was beautiful in the sunset light, strong and confident in a way that had nothing to do with her size. "Thank you," he said simply. Lucy smiled. "For what?" "For being you, for helping me, for—" He struggled with the words. "Lucy, I don't want this to be temporary anymore." Before she could respond, Connor's phone rang. It was Janet. "Sir," she said urgently, "Isabella's here at the office. She's with the SEC. They're claiming you've been involved in insider trading." Lucy saw Connor's face go pale. "What is it?" she asked. "What's wrong?" "Isabella," he said grimly. "She's not just trying to steal my company anymore. She's trying to have me arrested." Lucy's eyes hardened. "Oh no, she's not," she said firmly. "Not if I have anything to say about it." What Isabella didn't know was that Lucy had been keeping records of everything. Every suspicious meeting, every strange document, every whispered conversation she'd overheard at society events. She hadn't known why she was doing it at first, But now she understood. She hadn't just been protecting herself all these months, she'd been protecting Connor too. "Tell me again what you saw," Lucy's brother-in-law Mark said. As a corporate lawyer, he was their best hope against Isabella's accusations. They sat in Connor's study, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. David would meet with board members after hours, Lucy explained, pulling up her phone's calendar. Every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork, always at that little French restaurant on Fifth Avenue. Connor watched in amazement as Lucy laid out everything she'd noticed over the past months. The whispered conversations at charity events, the suspicious meetings, the way certain board members suddenly started avoiding Connor's eyes. "You saw all this?" Connor asked, stunned. "Why didn't you say something?" Lucy shrugged. "At first, I thought it wasn't my place. We had an arrangement, remember? But I kept notes anyway, something just felt wrong." Mark studied the evidence. "This is good," he said finally. "Really good. Isabella and David left a trail. They got sloppy." That night after Mark left, Connor found Lucy in the kitchen making tea. "Why did you really keep those records?" he asked. Lucy was quiet for a moment. "Because I saw how much they were hurting you," she said finally. "And I couldn't stand it." Connor stepped closer. "Lucy, about what I said in the garden." But before he could finish, his phone buzzed. Another crisis at the office. Another attack from Isabella. The moment slipped away. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Lucy's Today Show appearance was a huge success. She spoke honestly about her journey, about health at every size, and about the importance of self-worth. The host loved her so much, they invited her back for a regular segment. "You're a natural," Connor told her afterward, his heart swelling with pride. "The camera loves you." "The old Lucy would never have done this," she admitted. "She was too scared of what people would think." "And the new Lucy?" She smiled. "The new Lucy knows her worth. Thanks to you." Connor wanted to tell her that she'd had that worth all along. He'd just been too blind to see it at first. But there was too much happening. The SEC investigation, the board meetings, the constant threats from Isabella and David. Then came the charity gala. Connor's mother, Evelyn, was on the organizing committee, and she'd made sure Lucy got an invitation. "We can't have people talking," she'd said, though they all knew she was hoping Lucy would embarrass herself. Instead, Lucy arrived looking stunning in a designer gown that showed off her new confidence. Her social media followers had helped her choose it, and she walked into that ballroom like she owned it. "Who is that?" Connor heard someone whisper. "She can't be the same woman Drake married." But she was. She was still Lucy. Still kind, still smart, still plus-sized and proud of it. She'd just stopped hiding. The whispers turned to gasps when Isabella showed up on David's arm. She headed straight for Lucy, champagne glass in hand. "Well, well," Isabella sneered. "Still playing at being a society wife? We all know it's temporary. Connor will get bored eventually. He always does." Lucy smiled calmly. "You mean, like he got bored with you? Or did you get bored first when you realized your little plan wasn't working?" Isabella's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The SEC investigation, the board meetings, the French restaurant on Fifth Avenue?" Lucy's voice was sweet, but her eyes were steel. "I know everything, Isabella, and soon, everyone else will too." Isabella fled the ballroom in tears. David followed, but not before shooting Connor a look of pure hatred. Later that night, Lucy and Connor danced together, really danced, for the first time since their wedding. "You were amazing tonight," Connor said softly. "I learned from the best," Lucy replied. "You never let them see you sweat." Connor pulled her closer. "I'm not sweating now, but my heart's racing." Lucy looked up at him, and suddenly the room seemed to disappear. There was just them, swaying to the music, all their cards finally on the table. "Lucy," Connor started, "I need to tell you something." The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Across the room, David was on the floor, clutching his chest. As people rushed to help, a piece of paper fell from his jacket. Connor's assistant Janet appeared as if by magic, snatching up the paper before anyone else could see it. Her eyes went wide as she read. "Sir," she whispered urgently, "you need to see this. It's proof of everything." Lucy squeezed Connor's hand. "Go," she said. "Handle this. We'll talk later." But as Connor rushed off with Janet, Lucy couldn't help wondering if there would be a later. After all, once Connor saved his company, would he still need their arrangement? And more importantly, could she bear to leave now that her heart was involved? The paper from David's pocket changed everything. It was a signed contract between Isabella, David, and 3 board members, outlining their plan to take over Connor's company. Even worse, it proved they'd been planning this since before Connor and Isabella's divorce. "I can't believe she was playing me for so long," Connor said, pacing his office the next morning. Lucy sat quietly, watching him process the betrayal. "Some people only care about money," she said softly. "They forget what really matters." Connor stopped pacing and looked at her. "And what really matters, Lucy?" Before she could answer, Mark burst into the office, waving more papers. "We've got them," he exclaimed. "The SEC investigation, they faked everything. Isabella and David created false documents with Connor's forged signature." Lucy jumped up. "Can we prove it?" "Better than that," Mark grinned. "One of the board members just confessed. He's willing to testify against them." Connor sank into his chair, overwhelmed. "It's really over?" "Not quite," Mark cautioned. "We still need to present all this to the full board, and Isabella won't go down without a fight." He was right. That afternoon, Isabella stormed into Connor's office. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her panic. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, "after everything we had together." "We never had anything real," Connor realized. "It was all part of your game." "Oh, and what you have with her is real," Isabella sneered, pointing at Lucy. "Please, look at her. You only married her to get back at me. Tell her, Connor. Tell her the truth about your little arrangement." Lucy's heart stopped. This was it. The moment their fake marriage would be exposed to everyone. She braced herself for the humiliation, but Connor surprised them both. "Yes, Lucy and I had an arrangement at first," he admitted, "but something happened that I didn't expect." He walked over and took Lucy's hand. "I fell in love." Lucy's eyes went wide. Isabella's face turned red with rage. "You're lying!" Isabella shrieked. "This is just another trick." "No," Connor said quietly. "The only trick was believing you ever loved me. Lucy showed me what real love looks like. It looks like someone who stands by you, who believes in you, who makes you want to be better." Isabella stormed out, but Lucy barely noticed. She was staring at Connor. "Did you mean that?" she whispered. "Or was it just for Isabella's benefit?" Connor pulled her close. "Lucy Monroe Drake, when did you steal my heart? Was it during our morning workouts? Or when you stood up to my mother? Or maybe it was watching you help all those women find their confidence through your videos?" Lucy felt tears in her eyes. "Connor, The door burst open again. This time it was Janet. "Sir, the board is meeting right now. David called an emergency session." Connor groaned. "We never get to finish a conversation, do we?" Lucy squared her shoulders. "Then let's end this once and for all. I'm coming with you." The boardroom was packed. David stood at the head of the table, looking smug. "Connor, so glad you could join us. We were just discussing the company's future leadership." "Funny," Connor said. "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss." He nodded to Mark, who started distributing copies of the evidence. "What's this?" David asked, his smug smile fading as he read. "Proof," Connor said simply. "Proof of your conspiracy with Isabella. Proof of the forged documents. Proof of everything." One by one, the board members read through the papers. The room grew very quiet. "I move for an immediate vote," one of the older members said finally, "to remove David and his associates from the board and launch a full investigation." The vote was unanimous. Security arrived to escort David out. As he passed Lucy, he hissed, "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Lucy said firmly. "And if you or Isabella ever come near my husband again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you are." After David left, Connor turned to Lucy. "My husband?" he asked softly. "I thought this was temporary." Lucy took a deep breath. "Maybe it's time we talked about making it permanent." But before Connor could respond, his mother Evelyn burst into the boardroom. "Connor! Isabella's at the house. She's destroying everything." Lucy and Connor looked at each other. Once again, their moment would have to wait. "Let's go deal with Isabella," Lucy said. Together, as they rushed to the car, Connor couldn't help smiling. Maybe they hadn't had their big conversation yet, but they would. For now, knowing they were on the same page was enough. What they didn't know was that Isabella had one last desperate plan, and this time, she wasn't just after Connor's company. She wanted revenge. When Lucy and Connor reached the mansion, they found Isabella in the middle of their bedroom, surrounded by destroyed photos and torn clothes. But it was what she held in her hands that made Connor's blood run cold. Lucy's personal diary. "Put that down," Connor said firmly, stepping forward. Isabella's laugh was almost hysterical. "Oh, you should read this, Connor. Your precious Lucy has been writing down everything. Every little detail of your fake marriage. Every conversation about your arrangement. What do you think the press will say when they read it? Lucy felt her heart sink. She had started the diary when she first agreed to marry Connor, documenting everything in case she needed protection. But somewhere along the way it had become more. Her private thoughts, her growing feelings for Connor, her fears about their future. "Give me the diary, Isabella," Lucy said quietly. "Or what?" Isabella taunted. "You'll sit on me." "No," Lucy replied calmly. "I'll show everyone these." She pulled out her phone and pressed play on a video. Isabella's voice filled the room, talking about their plan to steal Connor's company. "I record all my workouts, remember? Including the ones where you and David were plotting in the garden thinking no one could hear you." Isabella's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Lucy challenged. "I have dozens of videos like this. You were so busy looking down on me, you never thought I might be a threat." Isabella's hand shook. You planned this? From the beginning?" "No," Lucy said honestly. "I just learned from you, Isabella. You taught me to always be prepared, to keep records, to protect myself. The only difference is I also protected the man I love." Connor's head snapped up at those words. Lucy met his eyes steadily, no longer afraid to show her feelings. Isabella looked between them, realization dawning. "This isn't fake anymore, is it?" she whispered. "You really love each other." "Yes," Connor said firmly. "We do." He held out his hand. "The diary, Isabella. It's over." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Isabella's shoulders slumped. She handed over the diary and sank onto the bed, suddenly looking old and tired. "I never thought," she started, then stopped. "I had everything. A good man, a comfortable life. Why wasn't it enough?" "Because you don't love yourself," Lucy said gently. "So you can't believe anyone else could really love you either." Isabella started to cry, real tears this time, not the dramatic sobs she usually used to get her way. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." After Isabella left, Connor turned to Lucy. "Did you mean it?" he asked. "What you said about loving me?" Lucy picked up her diary from where Isabella had dropped it. "Why don't you read it and find out?" Connor took the diary but didn't open it. Instead, he pulled Lucy into his arms. "I don't need to," he said softly. "I already know. Because I love you too." Finally, after months of interruptions and near misses, they shared their first real kiss. Not for show, not for revenge, but for love. Later that night, they sat in the garden, talking about everything they'd been afraid to say before. "When did you know?" Lucy asked, curled up against Connor's chest. "I think I started falling for you at our wedding," Connor admitted, "when you stood up to Isabella. But I didn't realize it until you started helping me save the company. How about you?" Lucy smiled. "When you defended me to your mother, nobody had ever done that before." "I should have done it sooner," Connor said regretfully. "I was so caught up in my revenge plan, I didn't see what was right in front of me." "We both made mistakes," Lucy said, "but they led us here." The next morning, Connor's mother, Evelyn, showed up unannounced, as usual. But something was different. She held a small gift box. "I heard about what happened with Isabella," she said awkwardly. "And I've been thinking about how I treated you, Lucy. I was wrong." Lucy opened the box. Inside was an old brooch, a family heirloom. "Connor's grandmother wore this at her wedding," Evelyn explained. "She was a strong woman who didn't care what society thought. Like you." Lucy felt tears in her eyes as she hugged her mother-in-law. Sometimes love could change more than just two people. It could change entire families. But their happiness was about to be tested one last time, because David wasn't done yet, and his final plan would put everything they'd built together at risk. David's revenge came in the form of a newspaper headline, "Drake Marriage a Sham, the contract that proves it all." Lucy's hands shook as she read the article over breakfast. Somehow David had gotten hold of the original contract she and Connor had signed, outlining their arrangement. The story was everywhere. TV news, social media, tabloids. Their private agreement was now public knowledge. "Lucy," Connor rushed into the kitchen, his face worried. "I just saw the news." "It's okay," Lucy cut him off, trying to smile. "We knew this might happen someday." But it wasn't okay. Lucy's social media followers were flooding her accounts with angry messages. Women who had looked up to her felt betrayed. Her fitness videos were being taken down. Everything she'd built was crumbling. "My lawyer can fix this," Connor insisted. "We'll sue them for..." "For what?" Lucy asked tiredly. "For telling the truth? We did make that contract, Connor. Everything they're saying is true." Connor grabbed her hands. "But it's not the whole truth. What we have now is real." Before Lucy could respond, her phone rang. It was the Today Show producer. "I'm sorry, Lucy," the woman said, "but we'll have to cancel your segments. Our viewers, they trusted you." One by one, the opportunities Lucy had worked so hard for disappeared. Her fitness company sponsors pulled out. Her speaking engagements were cancelled. Even her own wellness center clients started asking for refunds. "They think I'm a fraud," Lucy whispered that night, lying in bed next to Connor. "Everything I said about self-worth and being true to yourself, they think it was all lies." Connor pulled her close. "Then we'll fight back. We'll tell our side of the story." "How?" Lucy asked. "Who would believe us now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The next morning, Evelyn Drake appeared at their door, looking determined. "Get dressed," she ordered Lucy. "Both of you. We're going on television." "Mother?" Connor asked, confused. "I've called every talk show host I know," Evelyn announced. "And believe me, I know them all. We're going to tell the real story, how my son's foolish revenge plan turned into the greatest love story I've ever seen." Lucy stared at her mother-in-law. "You'd do that for us." "For you," Evelyn corrected, "because you taught me that real love isn't about appearances or social status. It's about what's in here." She touched her heart. The interview was set for that afternoon. Live television, with no editing. As they waited in the green room, David appeared. "Come to gloat?" Connor asked coldly. David smiled. "Actually, I came to make a deal. Call off this interview and I'll make the scandal go away. All it will cost you is control of your company." "Never," Connor started, but Lucy stopped him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked David. "You already lost. The board kicked you out. Isabella left you. What's the point?" "The point?" David laughed bitterly. "The point is that people like you and Connor always win. The perfect couple with their perfect life. Well, not anymore. Now everyone knows it was all fake." "You're wrong," Lucy said firmly. "What Connor and I have is more real than anything you've ever known, and we're going to prove it." The interview started rough. The host was skeptical, the audience hostile. But then Lucy started talking, not about the contract or the scandal, but about love. "Yes, we had an arrangement," she admitted. "I was supposed to help Connor get revenge. He was supposed to help my family, but somewhere along the way something magical happened. We fell in love. And why should anyone believe you?" the host challenged. That's when Connor stood up. "Because I'm about to do something I should have done months ago." He turned to Lucy and dropped to one knee. The audience gasped. "Lucy Monroe Drake," he said, his voice shaking. "Our first marriage was based on a contract, but I'm asking you now, in front of everyone, to marry me again. For real this time. Because I love you, your strength, your kindness, your beautiful heart. Will you give me a second chance to be the husband you deserve?" The studio went silent. Lucy felt tears rolling down her cheeks. But before she could answer, the studio doors burst open. Isabella ran in, looking frantic. "Stop!" she cried. "Before you answer, Lucy, there's something you need to know." The television studio erupted in chaos. Security tried to remove Isabella, but she fought them off. "Lucy needs to know the truth," Isabella shouted, "about the real reason Connor chose her." Lucy's heart stopped. She looked at Connor, still on one knee, his face pale. "Let her speak," Lucy said quietly. Isabella smoothed her designer dress, always aware of the cameras. "Connor didn't pick you randomly," she said. "He chose you because of me. Because years ago, before I lost weight, before I became who I am now, I looked just like you." The audience murmured. Lucy felt like the floor was spinning beneath her feet. "Is this true?" she asked Connor. Connor stood slowly, his hands shaking. "Lucy, please let me explain." "Just tell me the truth," Lucy insisted. "Did you choose me because I reminded you of the old Isabella?" "Yes," Connor admitted. "At first, but Lucy, that's not—" Lucy held up her hand, stopping him. All those months of building confidence, of believing in herself, seemed to crumble in an instant. "So I was never really me to you," she said softly. "I was just a replacement for who Isabella used to be." "No!" Connor reached for her, but Lucy stepped back. "Lucy, please. Yes, that's why I noticed you at first, but everything that happened after, every moment we shared, every feeling that grew between us, that was all real. That was all you." Isabella watched them with tears in her eyes. "I had to tell you," she said to Lucy, "because I've spent my whole life trying to be someone else, trying to be perfect, and it cost me the only man who ever truly loved me." She turned to Connor. "I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better than what I became." The studio was silent now, everyone watching Lucy. Even David, standing in the back, seemed moved by the raw emotion on display. Lucy looked at Connor, really looked at him. She saw the love in his eyes, the desperation to make her understand. But she also saw something else, something she'd been missing all along. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said finally. "All this time I thought I was learning to love myself because of you. But that's not true. I learned to love myself because I finally stopped trying to be what other people wanted." She turned to Isabella. "Thank you for telling me the truth, but it doesn't change anything. Because the woman Connor fell in love with, the real me, isn't anything like who you used to be. She's stronger than that." Connor's face lit up with hope. "Does this mean—" "It means," Lucy said, taking his hands in hers, "that I'm not going to answer your proposal. Not yet." The audience gasped. Connor's face fell. "Because first," Lucy continued, "I need you to understand something. I'm not your redemption story. I'm not your second chance at loving the old Isabella. I'm Lucy Monroe, and I'm nobody's replacement." "I know that," Connor said desperately. "Lucy, I know exactly who you are. You're the woman who stood by me when everyone else betrayed me, who taught me that true strength isn't about power or money, but about being genuine, who made me want to be better, not for revenge or status, but because you believed I could be." Lucy felt tears in her eyes. "And you're the man who learned to see past his own pain to love someone for exactly who they are, even if it took you a while to get there." "So," Connor's voice shook, "what happens now?" Lucy smiled. "Now we do this right. No contracts, no revenge, no living in anyone's shadow, just us building something real." She turned to the television cameras. "To everyone watching, especially my followers, I'm sorry you found out about the contract this way, but I'm not sorry about sharing my journey with you, because everything I said about loving yourself, about finding your worth, that was all true. I learned it by living it." David stepped forward from the back of the studio. "This wasn't how this was supposed to go," he said, sounding confused. "You were supposed to be humiliated." "That's your problem, David," Lucy said kindly. "You think love and truth are weapons, but they're really gifts. And when you try to hurt people with them, you only end up hurting yourself." 3 months after the television interview, Lucy sat in her new office, surrounded by vision boards and workout plans. Her honesty had won back her followers, more than ever actually. Women appreciated that she'd told the truth, that she'd shown them real growth and real love weren't perfect fairy tales. "Your next appointment is here," her assistant said, poking her head in. "It's Mr. Drake." Lucy smiled. "Send him in." Connor entered, looking nervous despite his expensive suit. They'd been dating, really dating, for the past 3 months. Starting over, doing things right this time. "Ready for our lunch date?" he asked. "Almost," Lucy replied. "Just need to finish this new program outline. My wellness center franchise is expanding to 3 new cities." Connor beamed with pride. After the scandal, Lucy had used her savings to buy out her wellness center from his company. "I need to do this on my own," she'd told him. Now her business was thriving because of her own hard work, not his money. "I don't know if I ever told you," Connor said, watching her work, "but you inspire me every day. The way you turned everything around made something positive out of all the chaos." "We both did," Lucy corrected him. "Remember last week's board meeting?" Connor grinned. The same board members who had once conspired against him now respected him more than ever. He'd changed how the company did business, focusing on ethical practices and genuine value instead of just profits. "Isabella called," he said suddenly. "She's doing well in therapy. Said to tell you thank you." After the television show, Isabella had finally faced her own demons. The woman who had spent years obsessed with perfection was learning to love herself, the real self she'd buried under designer clothes and diets. "And David?" Lucy asked. "Last I heard, he's working at a small investment firm in Chicago. No more hostile takeovers." They walked to their favorite cafe, the same one where they'd had their first real conversation after their wedding. The waitress recognized them, smiling warmly. "Your usual table?" she asked. As they sat down, Lucy noticed Connor seemed distracted. "Everything okay?" "Actually," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I've been thinking about what you said 3 months ago, about doing things right." Lucy's heart skipped a beat as he pulled out a small box. "This isn't a proposal," Connor said quickly. "Not yet, but it is a promise." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring. "This was my grandmother's promise ring. My grandfather gave it to her when they were starting over after a rough patch. It's not fancy or expensive, but it's real, like us." Lucy felt tears in her eyes as Connor continued. "I love you, Lucy Monroe, not because you remind me of anyone else, but because you're you. Strong, kind, genuine you. And whenever you're ready, whether that's months or years from now, I want to marry you again." Not for show, not for revenge, but for love. Lucy took the ring, sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I love you too," she said softly. "The real you. The man who learned that true strength isn't about power or revenge, but about being vulnerable enough to change." Just then, Lucy's phone buzzed. It was her agent. "The book deal is final," she exclaimed. "They want me to tell our whole story. The arranged marriage, the journey to self-love, everything." Connor smiled. "And what's it called?" Lucy showed him the title page on her tablet. "The Weight of Love, How I Found Myself by Losing My Fear." "Perfect," Connor said. "Just like you." "Not perfect," Lucy corrected him. "Real. That's better than perfect any day." As they enjoyed their lunch, Lucy thought about how far they'd come. From a fake marriage to real love, from revenge to redemption, from hiding behind masks to showing their true selves. But their story wasn't over yet. Because sometimes the happiest endings are really just new beginnings. 1 year later, Lucy stood in front of a mirror adjusting her wedding dress. This time there was no contract, no revenge plot, no hidden agenda, just love. "You look beautiful," Evelyn said, helping with the veil. Over the past year, her mother-in-law had become one of her closest friends and biggest supporters. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Lucy replied, smoothing the silk fabric. The dress was custom-made, not to hide her curves, but to celebrate them. "You changed us all," Evelyn admitted. "Me most of all. I was so caught up in what society expected, I forgot what really matters." Lucy's book had become a bestseller, touching hearts across the country. Women wrote to her daily, sharing their own stories of finding self-love and real happiness. Her wellness centers had expanded to 15 cities, with programs focusing on health at every size. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Isabella. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. After months of therapy, she'd found her way back to the person she used to be, not physically, but in her heart. "Of course," Lucy smiled. She and Isabella had developed an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared journey to self-acceptance. "I brought you something," Isabella said, holding out a small box. Inside was a beautiful bracelet. "It's my grandmother's. She gave it to me before I started changing myself to please others. I want you to have it." Lucy hugged her, careful not to wrinkle either of their dresses. "Thank you for being here today. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to start over," Isabella replied. Meanwhile, in another room, Connor paced nervously. His best man, surprisingly, was Mark, Lucy's brother-in-law, who had helped them expose David's scheme. They'd become close friends over the past year. "Relax," Mark laughed. "She already married you once." "That's what makes this so important," Connor said. "This time it has to be perfect. This time it's real." The ceremony was held in the garden, where they'd shared their first honest conversation. Lucy's social media followers had helped plan it, sending suggestions and well wishes. Some were even there as guests, women whose lives Lucy had touched through her work. When the music started, Connor turned to watch his bride walk down the aisle. Lucy was radiant, confident, beautiful, not because she'd changed on the outside, though her fitness journey had made her stronger and healthier, but because she finally saw in herself what Connor saw, a woman worth loving exactly as she was. Their vows were simple but profound. "Lucy," Connor began, his voice shaking, "a year ago I thought I was teaching you about revenge. Instead, you taught me about love, real love, the kind that makes you want to be better, that gives you courage to be yourself. I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you that kind of love." Lucy wiped away tears as she spoke. "Connor, our story started with a contract, but it grew into something so much more beautiful. You saw the real me even when I was hiding. You helped me find my strength, not by changing me, but by loving me until I could love myself. I promise to spend the rest of my life sharing that love with you, and with the world." At the reception, David made a surprise appearance. He'd asked permission first, through Mark, wanting to make amends. "I'm sorry," he told them simply. "Watching your love story taught me what I'd been doing wrong my whole life. I was chasing power when I should have been seeking truth." The biggest surprise, though, came during the speeches. Evelyn stood up, clinking her glass. "A year ago," she began, "I thought I knew everything about love and marriage, about what made a suitable wife for my son. I was wrong. Lucy and Connor taught me that real love isn't about status or appearance or society's expectations. It's about seeing someone's true self and cherishing it, supporting it, helping it grow." She turned to the happy couple. "You two didn't just find love. You showed all of us how to love better. how to be better. Later, during their first dance, Connor held Lucy close. "Happy?" he asked. "More than happy," she replied. "Content. Real." "You know," Connor said thoughtfully, "when I first came up with that crazy contract idea, I thought I was planning the perfect revenge. And instead I found the perfect love story. Not perfect because everything went smoothly, perfect because it was genuine, messy and complicated, and absolutely real." Lucy laughed. "Just like life." "Just like us," Connor agreed. As they danced under the stars, surrounded by people who had been transformed by their journey, Lucy thought about all the women who had written to her, thanking her for showing them that happy endings don't always look like fairy tales. Sometimes they look like two imperfect people, learning to love themselves and each other. Sometimes they include forgiveness and second chances. Sometimes they're about more than just romance. They're about finding your own worth and sharing it with the world. And sometimes, just sometimes, what starts as a fake marriage for revenge turns into the truest love story of all. The end.